Assalamu alaikum. The North Pulse में आपको खुशामदीद. Today we have a prominent personality of Canada with us, Dr. Munir Sheikh. He has been working with many prime ministers, including Paul Martin and Stephen Harper. He has done his PhD from Western University, specialized in economics, and his basically PhD thesis was on international trade. Then he became a chief statistician of Canada during 2008 for almost 2 years, when he resigned afterwards during the Harper government. He has worked with the Department of Finance for 25 years, rising to the associate deputy minister, worked closely with Mark Carney. As you know, now he is our designated prime minister. Dr. Munir Sheikh has also worked with the Prime Minister Paul Martin in its Privy Council office, which works to ensure that the goals and objectives and decisions of the Prime Minister are in line with the vision of the party or vision of Canada. So welcome, Dr. Munir Sheikh. It's lovely to have you. Thank you so much for sparing your time. How are you doing today? And please tell us about yourself.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. It really is a great honor for me to be talking to you. I'll give you a few words about myself. I came to Canada from Pakistan to get my PhD from the University of Western Ontario. Right after joined the Government of Canada, spent, as you said, 25 years at the Department of Finance, worked in the Privy Council office, and my last job was the Chief Statistician of Canada, from which I resigned in protest based on what the Harper government had been saying about Statistics Canada and myself. So I've been a retired old public servant since 2010 and took my time to write my novel, Islamabad, that I guess we can talk a bit about later on.
Oh, that's amazing. It's so difficult to comprehend what you have achieved during your life. I would also like to know when you moved to Canada and how, and definitely education helps, and your PhD in economics from such a prominent university here in Canada, that is useful. But along with that, what do you think, what made you so successful, or made you able to achieve what you wanted to achieve in life?
Well, let me say, thinking about it, I would say there are four things. I mean, of course, I can't talk about others. Everybody is different, but there are four things which have always driven me.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing is I always ask myself before I do anything, what is the purpose behind it? So just be very clear in your mind what is the purpose of what you're doing, whether it's studying, practicing my religion, getting married to somebody. It's always the same question: what are you trying to achieve? Uh, and once you're clear in your head what your goal is, then I guess the next thing on my mind always has been just think about it. Think how you're going to achieve your objectives. So thinking to me is probably the most important thing a human being can do, thinking.
Yeah.
And then the third thing is once you know what you're doing and you know how to do it, then you give it everything you have. It's just, go all out to achieve your objective. And that's what I've done. So those are the three things. And the fourth thing is once you have done all that, you leave it to God and say, look, I've done everything I can. The rest is in your hands. And I think the
Yeah.
benefit of that approach is that you're content with yourself. You say, I've done what I can. If I don't achieve my goal, it's not because I didn't make an effort. I
Yeah.
can't control everything, so I'm happy. So that's the way I've always operated. And
Yeah, that's
it's,
amazing to know. And no wonder you resigned when you noticed that the decisions which are made, they are against the values which you are representing at the Statistics Canada at the time. I also noticed that number three, which you're talking about, everything you have to give it to the cause, to the purpose, to the work which you are doing, right? That means you might have done a lot of sacrifices along the way while choosing your paths to work on. So, would you please highlight like what are the sacrifices which you had to make, and how do you feel about it today?
I, there are sacrifices in the sense that I did give up something, but I don't ever regret that because those things were done because I had a bigger objective in mind.
Mm,
Just as an example, when I studied in Pakistan, it always was a dream for everybody, including my family, that I should become a CSP officer.
mm-hmm.
Uh, I did become one. I wrote the exams, went for the interview. In fact, in the written exams, I topped in Pakistan and then I got an offer. But I said to myself, is it really what I want to do?
Mm,
And looking, we're talking here about 1969,
mm,
71 period. Looking at the situation in Pakistan, I became pretty depressed. And I
mm-hmm.
said, I'll be wasting my life
Mm.
if I join the civil service. So I'm going to stay in Canada and work as an economist. So that's one thing I can
Oh,
talk
wow.
about. The second
Yes.
thing you just mentioned, I resigned from my dream job as chief statistician of Canada.
Mm-hmm.
But the objective there was I am not going to sacrifice my reputation.
Right.
I'm not going to take the blame for something incredibly stupid that the government had done.
Mm.
Uh, I don't need that, so I'm just going to go home and leave my job. So that,
Yeah.
you can call it a sacrifice because it was my dream job, but
Yeah.
I was quite content in making that decision. I've never regretted doing it.
Mm. Okay, so that's amazing. Would you like to give any advice to the younger generation who are also dreaming, just like yourself? They want to achieve a lot in life. So, what they should be paying attention to, or how to succeed in life in general? Any advice for them, please?
I think the first thing I would say is that more than achieving success in your life, which is, oh, I'm going to become the chief statistician or I'm going to become the deputy minister. Those are important things. But for me, I think the most important thing is that you live your life based on a set of principles.
Mm.
Because if you violate your principles, you will never be happy, even if you become the president of the United States. Okay, that is so important just to make sure you have principles and you follow them. And then I think I just said what is it that worked for me, but there could be different things that work for different people. But things like, always think through what you're trying to do, be clear in your head what you're trying to achieve, give it the
Mm.
best that you can give. And then I don't think we can minimize the importance of the fact that after having done all that, you leave it to fate and say, I've done whatever I could. There's
That's
nothing
true.
more I can do.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to be happy with whatever the outcome is.
Yeah, that's amazing. And as you mentioned, set of principles, we are in Ramadan, in the month of Ramadan right now, and most of our principles, or all of them, they are guided basically by our religion many times, because that is the highest standard of values. If we can follow, many times we don't follow all of it, but if we follow, I think that's the set of principles which we can stick to, and then we can progress further in our regular life, whatever
Well, you
it is.
mentioned religion, and I would say to you that growing up in my 20s and 30s, I kept asking the same thing that I just mentioned to you earlier. What is the purpose of what I am doing
Right.
as a Muslim?
Yeah.
And most of the time, it wasn't clear to me what the purpose was. People were doing all kinds of things without asking the question, why am I doing this?
Hmm.
And so, uh, I spent a lot of time, many, many years researching Islam.
Mm-hmm.
And I came to the conclusion that the Islam that I see being practiced isn't what Islam really is.
Yeah.
And so I ended up writing an article in Pakistan's Dawn newspaper. It's
Mhm.
called Philosophy of Islam.
Mhm.
They published it, and that's how I take religion. Again, as I said earlier, in my life, uh, everything always starts with the question, what is the purpose of what you're doing?
That's
And
true.
so, for example, I would ask, why are you fasting?
Yeah.
Uh, there's a real important purpose behind it. So if you don't achieve that purpose, there's no point wasting your time just being hungry, you know?
Exactly. Exactly.
So, so just always ask yourself, what is the
Yeah.
purpose?
Yeah. Now that's amazing. And we are talking about big things over here. I must say that working with prime ministers, not with one, with many, or being the chief statistician of Canada. I mean, one could dream of doing those things, but you did all of that. And although you started your journey in Pakistan, writing exam for to become CSP officer, but you left all of that. You came to Canada, did all of those, big things, which anybody can dream of, as I said earlier. And then you thought, okay, I have served Canada enough. Probably this is time to give back to Pakistan. And you wrote a book on Pakistan. Instead of writing a book on Canada, you chose to write a book on Pakistan or on Islamabad, a tale of war and love. I would like to know why this, what happened in your thought process or why you do things. So, what was why in here?
Actually, I should tell you this. In 1965, the war between India and Pakistan, I lived in satellite town Rawalpindi, and 2 streets from our house, a bomb fell on a house, and I went to see that place. There was a massive crater, and 8 people died. And the destruction that I saw,
Yeah.
I can't forget that scene where I'm standing at the edge of the crater, and I said to myself, I have to do something about it. I had
Mm.
no idea what I can do, but I was so angry, and I said, I have to do something about it. And I'm sure you know, and everybody knows that it was Pakistan which started that war. So for me, that was simply inexcusable what had happened. And I kept telling myself I have to do something about it. But then, of course, I came to Canada,
Yeah.
studied, became chief statistician. When I left, that thought came back to me, that
Hmm.
commitment I'd made to myself, I have to do something about it. So I
Mm.
said, I'm going to write a novel covering the period of September 65, the war with India, to
Mm-hmm.
December 2007, which is the Benazir Bhutto's assassination. That is
Mm-hmm.
a really dark period in Pakistan's history.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to write this story that bad governments destroy the lives of their people. That is the
Mm.
theme of that book. So
Right.
it is this family I'm tracking, and how is that family coping with what the government itself is doing to its citizens? That's what the novel is about. It's
Right.
a universal theme. Bad governments hurt their own people,
Yeah.
and I'm really scared that that theme may come to pass in the United States right now.
Mm.
A bad government can actually really hurt a lot of Americans and, of course, a lot of Canadians.
Yeah.
So that was the purpose of me writing that book, but it goes back to my thought in 1965.
Hmm. So before we go on a break, I just have one question about your book. That you mentioned what did you write in this book, but my question is, throughout life you have worked with numbers and with facts and with the real life, and then when you thought to write a book, you chose to write a fiction book. So why it is fictional? Why didn't you choose to write something historical, non-fictional, like on truly data-based, etc.?
Well, I've written a lot of stuff which is actual database and all of
Yeah,
that. I mean, I have tons of
of
publications
course.
in
Yeah,
that area. So,
yeah.
uh, but when I decided to write this novel, 2 things I should mention to you. The first is I have always loved reading and writing fiction. I remember those days when I was living with my little nephews in Rawalpindi, and I used to lie in bed at night with them and tell them stories or make up stories.
Yeah,
So I've made up stories all my life as far as I can remember, and I read fiction like crazy. I mean, all the important authors you can think of, I was reading all those books. So
hmm,
my mind actually is uh, trained to think fiction, write fiction. So I could do that.
I see.
I published short stories. I've actually even published a little bit of poetry too in my
Oh,
young
okay,
age. So I've been
okay.
doing all of that. So
Hmm.
writing a fiction book wasn't a new thing for
I
me,
see.
although I could not properly write fiction. So I went to England, an academy in England, to take fiction courses, and I did that for 2 years before I actually finalized my book. So in a sense, my mind was working on both tracks, all this academic, technical, statistical work, but at the same time being really fond of fiction.
Amazing. Wonderful to hear that. Okay, we have to go on a break, and soon we'll be back and we will continue our conversation with Dr. Munir.
अगर आपको दुबई या मिडल ईस्ट नुमा जेवरात की तलाश है तो आपको दूर जाने की बिल्कुल जरूरत नहीं। आज ही हमारे मिसिसागा रिजवे स्टोर तशरीफ लाइए। अल करम ज्वेलर्स। हमारे पास सोने के बेहतरीन कंगन, कड़े, झुमके, हार और सोने के सेट्स भी दस्तयाब हैं। शादी हो या मेहंदी या कोई भी फंक्शन, आपकी पसंद के तमाम जेवरात आपको हमारे स्टोर में मौजूद मिलेंगे। आज ही हमारे स्टोर पर तशरीफ लाइए। अल करम ज्वेलर्स, 3465 प्लैटिनम ड्राइव, यूनिट 99, मिसिसागा। या फिर कॉल करें 905-828-0009। अल करम ज्वेलर्स, फरमाइश आपकी, गारंटी हमारी।
HK Movers. Home, offices, apartments and delivery. Big or small, we move it all.
HK Movers.
Local and long distance. We also ship cars, Kalar transport and moving services.
For service with a smile, give us a call.
Call Mr. Harminder 416-524-6704.
416-524-6704 पे.
Visit 140 Advance Boulevard, Unit number 10, Brampton.
Long distance moving specialist.
HK Movers. HK Movers.
Welcome back. Dr. Munir Sheikh, my next question to you, you have worked with many prime ministers. What was your experience with them?
Well, I did work with many prime ministers, but over time, I obviously got the opportunity to work more and more closely with them as I, moved up in the ranks in the public service. So my
Yeah.
closest working relationship, my closest was with Paul Martin.
Okay.
He was first the Minister of Finance, so I worked very closely with him. Then he became Prime Minister,
Hmm.
and he asked me to come when he moved to become Prime Minister. He asked me to move from Finance Department to the Privy Council office, which is his office.
Hmm.
So I went there to work directly for him. Uh, so I can tell you that Paul Martin is one of the most exceptional persons I have ever come across in my life. I mean, the person was absolutely committed to the welfare of Canada, and I learned a lot from him myself. I mean, he would give any question that he was dealing with, everything he had, with a clear mind. He would consult with everybody around him to make sure that he had all the information, and then he would make very tough decisions. and it really was quite a pleasure to work with him, not just as an official, but as a human being. Just a remarkable man. Uh, I also dealt with Prime Minister Chrétien, and not, of course, to the same extent, but again, such a wonderful person, a great leader that Canada had. Uh, and I mean, you meet these people and you can tell why they are prime ministers. You know, they were
Yeah, of
born
course.
to be
Oh,
that
yeah.
way.
Yeah.
But then, of course, I mean, they're both liberal prime ministers, but that
Yeah.
doesn't mean that the other party can't have a great prime minister. Brian Mulroney was an absolutely fantastic prime minister for Canada. So they can come from any party.
Yeah.
It's just their personalities, which can sometimes be so wonderful that you are amazed.
That's right. Okay, so my next question is associated with the previous question. You just mentioned that Paul Martin was used to work in the Ministry of Finance, and then he moved to he became the Prime Minister in 2003 or so. And now Mark Carney has been working in the Ministry of Finance or Bank of Canada, basically, but has a finance background, I would say. And now he is the Prime Minister. You know Mark Carney as well because you have worked with him for some time. So the angle of this question will be twofold. One, as coming from the knowing about the finance and becoming a Prime Minister, how helpful it is and how good the Prime Minister might be because they have a finance background, number one. And number two, since you know Mark Carney to some extent, what do you think, what kind of Prime Minister he might be?
I think a good prime minister doesn't have to have a background in finance. Like Jean Chrétien, he was the Minister of Finance at one stage, but he wasn't a financial expert in the sense that Mark Carney is. And Chrétien was a great prime minister. So that is, in general, not an absolute requirement. But given the situation we are facing at this time with President Trump and his policies, I think Mark Carney's background would be incredibly helpful to deal with what we are facing right now. He not only has this strength in economic issues, he has had an opportunity to deal with some really complex matters. The 2008-2009 financial crisis, he dealt with it as the governor of the Bank of Canada. He became the governor of the Bank of England and dealt with this incredibly complex issue called Brexit, which is not totally an economic issue. It's economic, political, social, everything combined with a huge economic fallout. And I think he did a wonderful job as the governor on that issue. So he has the ability to deal with those issues. He has the stamina to deal with that kind of complexity. He's completely focused, and so there are all these qualities he has that can be pretty helpful in the current situation. But the job of the prime minister is very different from being a finance minister.
Of course.
It requires a lot more than just being,
of course,
being a great economist. This is a new thing for Mark Carney, and we'll just have to wait and see how he tackles with it. But given how bright he is, I'm quite hopeful he'll be able to do a great job. Taking on Donald Trump, that is a difficult thing,
that is difficult thing, no doubt about it.
Let's just keep our fingers crossed and let's hope for the best.
So basically, he's what we learned about Mark Carney. He's very well focused and he's technocrat basically, and but he does not know sometimes how to communicate with the audience. So maybe on the other hand, the Trump, who is also not a politician, but he knows how to, reach out to the audience, to the common voter, to the common man. That's the kind of difference. But my next question is, now you have not only worked with the prime ministers, you worked with the prime ministers of different parties, as you mentioned. So Liberal Party has totally different vision for the country. On the other hand, conservatives have different vision. Like they both want to serve the country, and they both want to see the country progressing, Canada progressing, but their own ways. Their ways are different. And as you are economists, you can differentiate between the philosophy of these two parties, right? And you have worked with both of them. And even if you worked less, let's say, with one party, you have lived your life in Canada and you have seen all different types of governments, ruling this country. What do you think at this current time, when our best friend and neighbor has become our, worst enemy somehow? I'm talking about Trump. Who would be potentially has more capability to become a better prime minister?
Well, let me respond to that question in two parts. I guess the first part is the difference between the Conservative Party and the Liberal Party. The fundamental difference is that the Conservative Party is conservative on economic issues.
Yeah.
As an example, Stephen Harper was quite focused upon keeping the deficit under control, cutting taxes. So those are the objectives that the Conservative Party really cherishes.
Yeah.
The Liberal Party, on the other hand, I would say, is a party of pragmatists. They don't have any commitment to any, basic stuff. They really are always trying to see what is the right thing to do under the circumstances. They'll do extreme right-wing stuff if they think the country needs it, and they'll do extreme left-wing stuff if they think the country needs it. As an example, Paul Martin, the most successful finance minister I can think of, he is the one who got rid of the deficit in Canada, which one would normally associate with a conservative prime minister, but he dealt with it. So here's a liberal finance minister trying to deal with the conservative party issue. Very successfully handled that. And then the Liberal Party would take on causes like farmer care, dental care, and work on that as well. So it's not a party of dogmas; it's a party of pragmatism. So when people would vote based on what they prefer, but I think secondly, in the current circumstances, this distinction between conservative and liberal focus has become secondary. The most important issue is how can you handle President Trump? And that is where I think we're going to make a decision as to who would guide us better. I don't know much about Mr. Polyev. I know something about Mark Carney. I would feel pretty comfortable if Mark Carney was the prime minister, but Pierre Polyev may end up doing a good job as well. So I just don't know, but I'm sure you know the polls. The polls show an interesting thing, which is people still are giving some lead to the Conservative Party in the polls.
Yeah.
It's conservative versus liberal.
It got shrunk, but yes, still they are in lead.
Still ahead a bit. Compared to, but on the other hand, they think Mark Carney would do a better job than Pierre Poilievre in dealing with Donald Trump. So who knows where it's going to come out. But I would say, given the difficulty and the complexity of the situation, I think we all need to offer some prayers to hope for the best. It's a
Yeah.
very difficult situation.
Yes, that's right. Okay, thank you so much for joining us. Unfortunately, I had many other questions to ask you about tariff, etc., but we are running out of time. And I hope to have you some other time to discuss those issues. But for now, we have to leave. Thank you so much for joining me, Dr. Munish Sheikh. I truly appreciate your time sparing for this show. Thank you.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and I hope we can get an opportunity to talk about the tariffs because
Yes,
it really is a
that's
big
important.
issue right now.
Exactly. Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you so much for staying with us. और रमज़ान का महीना है, प्लीज़ अपनी दुआओं में हमें याद रखिएगा और फिर नेक्स्ट वीक में दोबारा मुलाकात होती है। बहुत शुक्रिया।